Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Clarion Herald's NOLA Catholic Parenting Podcast. I'm Christine Bordelon, Associate Editor of the Clarion, here with Peter Finney, our editor, as we endure our 10th month of this COVID pandemic. I've been hearing a lot about adult mental health being compromised as parents are working from home in the same place 24/7, and some are still even educating their kids who have not yet returned to in-person school. Even the state of Louisiana, I saw on TV the other day, has a mental health hotline for adults. So it made me wonder, if the pandemic is affecting children. So today I've invited Dr. RaeNell Houston, Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Archdiocese of New Orleans, Dr. Doug Walker, Chief Program Director and Clinical Psychologist, Mercy Family Center, which offers counseling services for all ages, and Charlotte Phillips, one of our NOLA Catholic parenting bloggers and a parent of 4 children. Thanks to all of you for joining me today. I'd like to start with Charlotte in our discussion today, with being a mother of children ages 9 and 7, 5, and almost 3. What's going on in your house? Have you witnessed a lot of changes in your kids since the pandemic?
Thankfully, the kids are all back in school, which for them, for their mental health, has been a huge help with them being able to be around their friends again and socialize. But the pandemic has obviously affected them, especially in the beginning. All of our emotions were just, heightened. Their anxiety levels were high. I think a lot just because of all the unknowns of what was happening. And then sadness, like I said, being back in school has been a huge help for them, especially for our 7-year-old son. Just being around his classmates has changed his attitude tremendously. But there is still a sadness happening right now. Obviously, they're not as involved with as many extracurricular activities right now. We aren't seeing the same number of people that we used to see. Obviously, with the pandemic happening, there's no Nutcracker performance this year to perform in. There's no birthday parties to go to. So there's just a sadness. They're missing out on those social events.
Okay. Well, Dr. Walker, I was thinking about Mercy Family Center and reading that y'all have done, has it been 6,000 counseling sessions since the pandemic started in March?
Absolutely, yeah. So we get inquiries for adults and children every single day, and we've been monitoring it since March. We flipped from an in-person presence across our 3 clinics to a virtual one in just a matter of days. So our psychiatry and social work services, therapy, are now provided online. And so we are working extra hard to meet the demand. I do note that over the last just couple of weeks, we have a bump in particular for kids. And I think it's that crunch, that squeeze, that pressure that comes with not only school, but the expectation of Christmas and everything that goes along with that. And I think really the grief and loss that's represented this year. And as Charlotte has pointed out, a lot of things are just not, we just don't have the access anymore.
So what do you hear mostly? Is that the kids are anxious? Are they depressed? Are they worried about things? What are some of the things you're hearing?
Yeah, our 1 and 2 referral questions is around depression and anxiety. That's traditionally what we've always seen. Oftentimes, pre-existing conditions are exacerbated by stressful events like COVID-19 and the coronavirus. Many of these were already pre-existing. However, I think more and more we're seeing what we call adjustment issues. Kids who are coming back to school and for the first time are having trouble readjusting to, I hate to use the term, the new normal. So new conditions, I think, is what's causing our bump in referrals for children.
Okay. Well, Dr. Houston, we spoke with someone in your office, Casey Webb, a few months ago about how technology was kind of incorporated, full force in the schools once the pandemic hit and the kids were learning from home. And so, I was thinking the kids are back in school and they've been back in school this whole semester now. So what are you hearing about the mental health, from your teachers and administrators in Catholic schools? Is this something, and I want to know if there's something that the Catholic schools in our diocese has addressed early on, when the pandemic hit?
Right. So when the pandemic hit back in March, we immediately started to encourage our school leaders to assist their faculty and staff and reaching out to each of their families for regular check-ins. And we thought that was really important for the teachers and staff who worked with those students on a daily basis to do, so that they could keep their fingers on the pulse of how those students were doing, not just academically, but emotionally, because of the absence of that socialization piece. And when they're not standing in front of you or sitting in front of you every day for 6 hours a day, it's really hard to gauge where they are. So having those Google Meets or those Zoom calls where you could see their faces and see how they're acting and engaging, those were really important for us for that fourth quarter, so that we could kind of keep an eye on the students and then offer support to the students themselves and to their families for whatever the area of need might be. Most of our students are back in school and have been, as you said, since August. We have less than 5% of our population have opted for virtual learning,
Wow.
completely, or remote or at home learning. In most of those cases, it is because students have underlying health issues, or they live with people who are immunocompromised, et cetera. So it's usually there are extenuating circumstances that that merit that decision. We are seeing students having trouble paying attention for long periods of time, issues with concentration, memory. Some students have kind of lost that spark for creativity. And like Dr. Walker said, we're seeing that those symptoms of anxiety and depression as well. It varies from community to community and student to student, but we definitely have seen more of the mental health issues than we have in the past.
Well, Dr. Walker, I know you were instrumental in creating How's Your Five to help disaster victims express themselves. I know it's the 5 areas of, what is it? Relationship, work, play, sleep, and eat. Is that it? And so I was thinking about that, and I was
pretty close. Yeah, no,
pretty close.
yeah, pretty close. It was actually, How's Your Five was born in Joplin, Missouri after their EF5 tornado, and Mercy Family Center was invited up there to help with the response because of our experience here in New Orleans with not only Hurricane Katrina, but the BP oil spill. And so How's Your Five focuses on peer-to-peer support. So looking at work and school, love, relationships, play, so positive activities, sleep habits, and the eat is really consumption, not eating too much, not eating too little. Well, also consumption around drinking and not coping poorly using alcohol. And so we being the larger Mercy Health System have adopted it system-wide with 45,000 employees. So it's actually become quite popular to reinforce this idea of supporting each other.
Well, I wonder if you have adopted that in any way to help adolescents and younger people in school during this particular crisis that's now, lingered this long.
Yeah, it always depends on the school's needs. And so there are some schools, certainly we're using in the medical side, some schools locally have adopted it kind of on a one-on-one basis. Okay. I found in particular when we are in crisis, we being a community, a school, it's very difficult and sometimes contraindicated to start new programs because you have to go with what you know. And so what did you establish for social emotional learning, your counseling services prior to the event? Because adding something new like that can oftentimes add additional stress. So I think as people kind of pull out of or, see the light at the end of the tunnel, introducing some social emotional programs, things like How's Your Five would be good. But when you're in it, I don't think it's ever a good idea to add new programs. So I don't know what Dr. Houston's take is on that.
Yeah, so we have always partnered with community partners like Mercy Family Center and Ascension DePaul Services, which is formerly Daughters of Charity, and other community health providers like Children's Hospital, et cetera, to help us to provide the mental health and behavioral health services that we need in our school systems. Because the reality is schools are often the front line, right, of defense for many issues, including mental health issues. So we have really been leaning on our partners in the community, Catholic Community Counseling, Catholic Charities, all of those entities we have continued to lean on, most especially during COVID, to help us to provide the services that our students and our families need.
Well, Dr. Houston, what are some of the measures? Do you know specifically some of the things that are being used in the school from these entities?
So we have licensed counselors. We also have social workers in our schools that work with our families and our children, and they are doing both small group therapy sessions as well as individual sessions. They're also doing guidance sessions with students in the classroom, working on specific social emotional learning topics, helping them to develop positive coping strategies and mechanisms for stress, for anxiety, to help mitigate some of the pressure and the struggles that they feel. And we have schools, elementary schools, that have opted this year, instead of offering a foreign language to kids, we're doing guidance. We're going to have the counselor go into classrooms a couple times a week to work specifically with social emotional learning, whereas that might have been a once a month thing before. Now it's happening 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the grade level and where the needs are, et cetera.
That's amazing. Well, Dr. Walker, I wanted to ask you real quick. Y'all have the 15-year-old Project Fleur de Lis that's in the schools and this community-based mental health programs.
Yes.
And so I wondered, are all the services online now that are normally, one-on-one in the school? Is that how y'all doing it with Project Fleur de Lis?
Yeah, leading up to the coronavirus, Fleur de Lis was actually in a transition with less direct service and more guidance. So training individuals, guiding them through to provide direct services in schools. I would say that Fleur de Lis is continuing to transition as being more of a training consultancy around best practices, particularly in trauma. Right now, I'm working with the Project Fleur de Lis team to take all their in-person trainings that they have been extremely successful over the past 15 years and transferring it to online educational platforms for really the future indefinitely. What's amazing about that is now we're not just a local or even regional entity to provide care for mental health and well-being. We can actually now exceed our boundaries and go nationwide or even internationally.
Dr. Houston, I remember in August, there was a lot of concern, especially among public school teachers, about going back to in-campus learning, on-campus learning. What has been the reality for our Catholic schools? First, certainly the teachers have been fantastic, but can you kind of give a snapshot of what has been like the medical situation at our schools? Has it been okay?
Yeah, it's been good. Our faculty and staff members, I have to say, are absolutely amazing. They are the most dedicated individuals that I have ever seen. Creative, and just wanting to do what is best for the students at whatever cost, right? So they were really excited to come back to school in August, the majority of them. I had very few teachers call personally to me to say, I'm a little concerned, and we work with individuals on a case-by-case basis, of course, but by far, our teachers were really excited about coming back to school. With regards to the pandemic and numbers, outbreaks, we have been extremely blessed that we have been in school since August on our normal schedule, and we have not been directed to shut any schools down by the Louisiana Department of Health because of outbreaks. We have had numbers of positive test results, but we have not had significant clusters in any of our schools. So what we do is, as soon as we get an indication that a child has tested positive or there's a presumed positive case, we reach out to our regional health director with the Department of Health, and they give us direction as to who needs to isolate, who needs to quarantine, what the length of time is. So on any given day, I could have hundreds of kids at home learning from home because they're isolated or quarantined because they've been exposed to someone who tested positive. Teachers could be teaching from home with a substitute in the classroom because they may have come in contact with someone who tested positive or tested positive themselves. But because of the technology that we're using, we're able to continue with our learning process as long as people are not symptomatic and they're able to participate in learning or teaching. So we've been extremely blessed, honestly. And I have to give credit to our school leaders, our faculty and staff, and our families for being diligent, for following the protocols that we've established and that we know work to mitigate and stop the spread.
That's great.
Well, I've heard it's been like if a kid in a class tests positive, it's been more of that kind of thing. And then that class will stay home for a couple, 10 days, 14
Mhm.
days, whatever the protocol is currently. Is that pretty much what's been going on? It's like one class gets isolated for a short period of time?
Yeah, and it depends, because there's like this 48-hour window of, let's say a kid tests positive, a parent calls on Monday and says, my child tested positive this morning. Well, the kids in that class don't have to isolate or quarantine, because it's not the positive test result didn't happen within 48 hours of that child being in contact with their peers. So they may not have to quarantine or isolate. But if they were, then yes, that class would quarantine as well as the teacher, or isolate for whatever the duration is.
Well, Dr. Houston, I wanted to ask you a personal question because I know
Uh-huh.
you have a daughter with special needs that's in school. So I wondered, how's she doing and how is her school, addressing the mental health issue, maybe in a different way, with her, because maybe she doesn't have quite an understanding of exactly what's going on.
Yeah, she's doing um way better than I thought she would.
Oh, that's
She's
great.
actually still virtual because her doctor hasn't released her to go back into the brick and mortar building. She is immunocompromised.
Oh,
So she's doing virtual learning. She misses her friends, but they're able to Zoom and to do Google Meets. So she'll see her friends that way. She's not involved in any extracurricular activities this year. We pulled her out of dancing and cheerleading and choir, everything, because we just can't take that risk with her because of her health issues. She has had some moments where she's been emotional, and you can see she's anxious because of all of the changes with COVID that we have to abide by. But we pay really close attention at home as parents, and we make sure that we spend a lot of time with her and help her to have mechanisms to cope. And we have a pretty tight knit family, and we're able to socialize a little bit within our little bubble of people. And so far we've been good. Thank you for
okay.
asking.
Oh, well, sure. She's sweet. And I know your family's special and I know they're helping out, just like many families, I'm sure, going through the same
Absolutely.
thing. So everybody's stepping up to get through this situation. Well, Dr. Walker, I want to end with you and see if you could lead us with a few tips that parents can use, if they see some changes in the mental health of their child during this crisis. Can you give us like a few little tips that could help?
Well, I think the first tip is to manage sleep as best you can. It's probably more important than nutrition, really. And these virtual lives that kids lead, parents don't understand that, especially if you're online, even gaming in the evening time, the young brain is activated at the lower brain, as if it was sunrise. And so kids will lose sleep. Also, there's just a social aspect of that. 2 a.m. No child needs to be up at 2 a.m. doing any kind of social networking. I always advise parents, beyond managing sleep, to manage routines as best as possible, expectations of what's going to happen next. In a world where we can't predict what the next day will be based on positivity rates, I think parents need to do their best in planning planning a day for a child, but also modeling good flexibility. So when you can't go, I don't know, to see City Park lights, I want you as a parent, like I would, I think hopefully we all do, is to model good coping. But the third, I think, and the final is, if you see anything that is unusual for your child, is to ask those other people in their lives who also know them if they've noticed anything different. I rely and still do on school counselors and teachers because they have also a good snapshot of kids from that day-to-day basis. So if you see something unusual, ask others about it and take action.
Well, Charlotte, I want to go back to you there real quick because I know with the 4 kids, y'all used to going outside, bike riding, doing lots of stuff together. So what are some of the things that Dr. Walker was saying? Is that what you guys are doing with your 4 kids?
I mean, kind of what he was saying, we quickly realized, I guess probably early in that second week of quarantine, that not having a schedule was not going to work. So we created a really loose schedule, and then my husband was thankfully very vocal about the importance of getting outside every day. So every day we made sure we took a bike ride, we made sure we took a walk, we did something to keep all of us active and just out of these four walls that we were, we couldn't go anywhere else. So it was easy to just be able to get outside. Thankfully, we had really nice weather, which made that a lot easier. And we kept with their bedtime routines. I mean, we may have pushed it back like half an hour, 45 minutes, but we still got them to bed and made sure they were getting their sleep. And then also, I think it's important as Catholics, I know for me, I've made sure to keep my daily prayer time. That's a huge importance to me. And I think that keeping my daily prayer keeps me less anxious. It keeps me less worried, which then keeps my kids less anxious and less worried. I mean, the pandemic's been really difficult, obviously, for all of us. And it's just nice having that reminder that, we're not in this by ourselves. We're not in this alone, that God's here with us too.
All right. Well, y'all, this has been so informative. I think this is going to help, all of our viewers out there just to gain just a little sense that they're not alone and maybe some tips that they didn't think of as parents because they're just trying to get along and get through work and get through their day. But I think that this would really be helpful for everyone. So thanks for joining us today, and stay tuned for our next NOLA Catholic Parenting podcast. In the meantime, check us out on NOLA Catholic Parenting.org and also in the printed Clarion Herald. It's available at mass and retail outlets, and again online at clarionherald.org. And the three times a week we have new blogs, as Charlotte knows, she sends them in at NOLACatholicParenting.org. Thanks so much.